Congress calling for investigations. And also tonight, there's another example that does expose the Destroy Trump media and the Democrats' real agenda. And by the way, on top of all of this, another massive scandal that Democrats and the media are glossing over, according to an explosive new report from John Solomon. He'll join us later. The former FBI director, James Comey, tonight could be in serious legal trouble and have committed several felonies because 4 of the 7 memos about his conversations with President Trump did in fact contain classified information. Now, we know from Comey's testimony that he shared at least one of the memos with his friend. Remember the Columbia professor who leaked it to the New York Times on his behalf because he wanted a special counsel, and he wanted that to lead to the appointment of a special counsel, which, by the way, it did. And according to the same report, the FBI considers the memos that Comey made, well, they happen to be government property, typed on a government computer in a government car, not personal documents, which is how Comey described them under oath. And, of course, tonight, Comey's friend is denying that the memos that he was given contained classified information at the time he received them. How would he know? He's also denying, by the way, giving the press the actual memos. Really? So what it all boils down to, what we're now living through, is a massive, huge double standard, selective moral outrage. Now, we know real felonies, real crimes were committed. Again, things the mainstream media will not report or tell you if it doesn't have the word Russia in it. Hillary Clinton mishandled and destroyed top secret, classified, special program information, government information. But the media, the Democrats, that's not a big deal. Clinton, as Secretary of State, handed up to 20% of America's uranium. You want to talk about a Russia conspiracy? To Vladimir Putin and the Russians and the people involved in that deal kicked back over $100 million to the Clinton Foundation. And by the way, Bill Clinton's doubled his speaking fees in Moscow, where I grew up from. That's called bribery, pay to play. And, of course, we got the former Attorney General, Loretta Lynch. And Lynch, by the way, also pressured James Comey to call the investigation into Clinton's server. Don't call it an investigation, call it a matter, which is what the Clinton campaign wanted. You know, who cares about possible obstruction of justice in that case, right? And, of course, we have the deep state. What have they been doing? Selectively leaking and unmasking raw intelligence to a corrupt media. The deep state leaks are so bad that a recent Senate report found that they were happening at a rate of 1 a day through the end of May. In other words, 125 leaks at least in 126 days, 7 times more than the previous 2 administrations. But nothing there, right? Now, Comey leaks government documents to the media. Do they care? Not at all. Democrats, members of the Destroy Trump media, have now for months been lying, smearing, slandering, trying to delegitimize the president, stop him from doing his job. But that's just what they do. We shouldn't care, right? It just shows just how abusively biased, agenda-driven these so-called rigid, radical left-wing ideologues are. They are doing a disservice to you, the American people. They are purposely ignoring the real scandals that now exist, real crimes committed, real collusion that occurs. They hate this president so much and want him to fail, they'll do anything they can to get him thrown out of office. You got the Democrats, you got CNN, the New York Times, you got NBC, the Washington Post. They don't give a rip about the president's agenda. They'll do anything they can to stop it. And more importantly, at the bottom of that, on the foundation of that, they don't care about the millions and millions of forgotten men, forgotten women that this last election was about. It's all about me, me, me in the media. It's all about their Russia obsession in the media. It's all about their left-wing ideological agenda. So I was on vacation last week. I try to gain perspective when I'm away. This is what I have concluded in the state of the country as we are today. The media, the deep state, the Democrats, the never-Trumpers, and frankly, lazy, spineless Republicans, they are not giving a rip about enacting President Trump's agenda, and they're working hard to stop it. And by the way, who's impacted by that? The hardworking men and women that make this country great every day. Guess what? These people are showing no respect to the American people and their decision. No desire do they have in the media, all these groups, to get the country moving in a direction that will help every person that went to the polls in November. To the media, to all these groups, the deep state, Democrats, weak Republicans, it's all a big game of gotcha. They try to take down the president. They lie. They use innuendo, selective moral outrage. Any mention of the word Russia, they go over the cliff, and they're foaming at the mouth. So before we continue, I want to remind you, the American people, what this country needs to get done, and sooner rather than later, and what the media needs to focus on, even though they never will. You can never trust them. The border wall needs to be funded so we can protect the American people. Obamacare, let's see, it's been promised by Republicans in 2010, 2014, 2016, and now they're saying they're not sure they can get it done? Well, maybe they should be done if they can't. And we need to stop. Look at the situation in North Korea, a clear and present danger to the entire world, of course, thanks to Bill Clinton's 1990s bribes to the rogue regime and then being played. And, of course, they got the nuclear weapons that Clinton promised they'd never get. And now you got a lunatic, Kim Jong-un. Now he's seeking ICBM capability. Then we got Iran. Well, of course, now we can never allow them to get nuclear weapons, despite the billions Obama gave them and the right to continue to spin their centrifuges. We need to get the economy going. We need to get Americans back to work, Americans off of food stamps, Americans out of poverty, Americans buying homes. And you know what? All of this is so important. But all I want to talk about is Russia, Russia, Russia. You, the American people, the people that went to the polls in November, the forgotten men and women that have been left behind, you're now caught in a crossfire, an ideological crossfire. The groups we've been telling you about, the Destroy Trump media, the obstructionist Democrats, the deep state, never Trumpers, lazy Republicans, are all doing this because they don't like how you voted. They think they know better. And that's why tonight we have to call out the Republican lawmakers. They have asked for this job, and they're now failing. They are part of the problem. They need to cancel their August recess, stay working like the rest of America in Washington to fulfill the promises they made to all of us here. If you people can't get health care done, get the wall funded, the economy moving, a new budget plan passed, you are failing the American people. The president has been in office since January doing everything he can do on his own. It's time you in the House and Senate get to work. Stop with the vacations. If you have to work 14 hours a day, 7 days a week like most Americans, do it. It's time to end the excuses. Find a way to get it done. Because you owe the American people. You gave your word. In other words, do your job. That's what you were hired for. You're supposed to be public servants. Do what the American people sent you to D.C. for. Here with reaction tonight, Fox News contributor Laura Ingraham. All right, Laura, this is like pent up. By the way, thanks for filling in. We missed you. What's that?
We missed you.
No, you missed you. You were here, so you did a great job holding down the fort. This is pent-up fury that is building in me. I can't take it.
Well, you're right, and I think when you get away for just even a few days where you can think and you're not bombarded 24/7 with politics, you actually talk to real people who have real lives that are separate from Washington and the Washington-New York axis, and you find out what's on their mind. And we have the opportunity to do that on radio every day because we talk to people 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. But somehow when you get to decompress a little bit, it all does settle in. And it is stunning, number one, that we have Republicans who refuse to produce results for the Trump agenda that won a historic election. That's outrageous. And number two is, of course, the media, who you rightly call deranged for their obsession with issues that most Americans think, they're important, but they're not everything. And you can't focus 24/7 on those issues to the exclusion of health care and economic recovery and the good things that have already occurred under the Trump administration. So you're right to be frustrated. I think Americans are extremely upset and enraged that Mitch McConnell cannot deliver a bill to the president's desk that he can sign. I don't see how you can keep your job as Senate Majority Leader.
They don't deserve to. They wouldn't deserve to.
now, and you wouldn't be able to keep your job in corporate America with this track record. And 6 months into this, almost, and 5.5 months into this administration, they should have already delivered on tax cuts, on infrastructure, and clearly on repealing Obamacare and replacing it with something that's much more market-based that will bring down the cost of health care. All the things that you've talked about. This is what the folks want. They refuse to do it. Looks like we're going to have to get Republicans who can actually deliver what the voters want.
The idea that they have about 30 days left in the legislative calendar in the next 6 months. Do you have time to eat lunch? I don't. You know what I eat for lunch?
No,
Campbell's soup every day. These people take more vacation. I've never seen anything like it.
I just had a couple of oatmeal cookies that Debbie, the makeup lady, had.
Yeah, green room food, which is the worst.
Yeah, exactly. No, we don't have time to do much of that. But they do have, I got to say, I've been to the Senate dining room a few times because there are actually a few senators who are trying to get things done. I've been there a few times, and it's always packed. I mean, they always have time to eat lunch up at the Senate dining room. So they're feeding themselves quite well. But I think we have to hold them accountable. Look at what the left is doing, Sean. They're mobilizing the resistance. Elizabeth Warren's putting out the call to mobilize against the Republicans in this critical week, 2-week period. And what are the Republican voters doing? They're scratching their heads because they said, we already told you what we want. We voted for Donald Trump. We told you what to do. You refused to do it. That's unconscionable. It's unconscionable.
All right, coming up, Sarah Carter, John Solomon, Jay Sekulow join us with reaction to the big breaking news today. And then later, it's time to hold these Washington Republicans accountable. Senator Ted Cruz, he thinks they should stay home from vacation. He'll update us on the Senate's attempt to repeal and replace Obamacare. All that, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. And wait till you see the final minute, a new segment tonight. Terrence Williams gets the last word. We'll explain coming up. Welcome back to Hannity. Former fired FBI Director James Comey is in deep trouble tonight, just weeks after testifying under oath that the memos that he wrote and then later leaked about his conversations with President Trump were not government records and contained no classified information. There's this bombshell from John Solomon that reveals more than half the memos the former FBI Director James Comey wrote as personal recollections of his conversations with President Trump about the Russia investigation have in fact been determined to contain classified information, according to interviews with officials familiar with the documents. Also tonight, there's another explosive news story from John Solomon and Sarah Carter regarding the meeting between Donald Trump Jr. and a Russian lawyer that's sending the media into a feeding frenzy yet again. Could it have been set up by Democratic operatives? You won't catch this on the other news channels. Joining us now, Circa News, Sarah Carter, the Executive Vice President at The Hill, John Solomon, the attorney for President Trump, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow. Let's start, Jay, with you on the issue of 18 U.S. Code 641, the Records Act, government property leaked to the New York Times, 18 U.S. Code 793, the Espionage Act, classified information. Are they both felonies?
Yeah. They both. One is 793 is always a felony. 641 can be a felony, and in this case, my position would be that it would be. But let's be really clear what happened here. So James Comey, we now know, by the way, he didn't just leak one memo, but four that he sent to this law professor. The law professor's acknowledged he got it. Just the unauthorized disclosure in and of itself would be a violation of the law, and in my view, a felony. So let's take it a step further. It was done, and James Comey testified to two things. One, he said it was his personal notes. The government's obviously taken a very different view. They're saying it is government property. Number two, he leaked that information for one purpose only, and that was to obtain a special counsel, which he did. So now let's put this into context. James Comey illegally leaked government information to a third party, ultimately to the New York Times, for one purpose, and that was to get a special counsel. So the special counsel was put in place based on documents that were illegally leaked. Everything's wrong with that picture. That is not the way it's supposed to be.
Sarah Carter, let's go to you and your reporting along with John. Good to have you both back, by the way. Let's start with your reports about, was this possibly a setup? In other words, this whole meeting with Donald Trump Jr., is this a very different story than the American people are being told?
Yeah, I think there's a story here that people aren't getting from the mainstream media. And one is this. Natalia Veselnitskaya, she was the attorney that Donald Trump Jr. met with, was actually connected to a company called Prevazon Holdings, which was run by a Russian named Denis Katsyk. And Denis Katsyk actually hired Fusion GPS. Remember, this was the security investigative firm behind the Christopher Steele dossier. So the Christopher Steele dossier, which has been disreputable, which people have not been able to prove anything, that would try to connect, Donald Trump to the Russians, was actually the company that this woman was working for. So it makes sense. And I know that congressional investigators are looking into this. What was her connection to Fusion GPS, and how does that play out with the meeting that she held with Donald Trump Jr., which he said he did not know prior to that meeting exactly who she was and what she was representing. So that is a very, very important part of this story.
And John, I want to juxtapose this to another story that Politico broke, and this goes back in January of this past year. And the headline is, Ukrainian efforts to sabotage Trump backfire. Kiev officials are scrambling to make amends with the president-elect after quietly working to boost Clinton. Now, the story goes on to talk about that this wasn't the only campaign that was boosted by a former Soviet bloc country, and Ukrainian officials, government officials, tried to help Hillary undermine Trump, questioning his fitness for office, and also discussing documents implicating a top Trump aide and corruption and so on and so forth. Is that coupled with this dossier that was put together? Are those two examples of foreign governments working with the Clinton campaign to influence the outcome of an election?
That's a great question. We don't know who else. I mean, we've only heard about Russia, but many other countries had an interest in this election, and we don't know who they helped or what they did to help. I think the most important question to answer today is who allowed that Russian lawyer into the United States. She was denied a visa. We were able to report that on Sunday. That means someone had to give her special permission. It's called parole entry. And when we find out what agency let her in, we're going to know who's responsible for getting her in the country and putting her in the position to meet with Donald Trump Jr.
Don't we know that was in the Obama administration, John?
There was no doubt it was in the Obama administration. It occurred in 2015 and 2016. Now the question is, what agency is responsible? Could it be the FBI, the Justice Department? Those are questions we need to answer.
Do you believe that this was a setup by the DNC and this fusion group that we're talking about?
There's not enough facts and evidence to assume that yet. I think there is clearly a lot of people that were working at once, and what overlays they have and what intersections they have, we don't know, in part because Fusion GPS hasn't answered a lot of the questions that the Senate has put to them. Until we find out who is funding the dossier, until we find out who brought Natalia into the country, until we learn those sort of questions, we're not going to know the full picture. And I think it's too soon to make any assumptions.
We're going to have more with Sarah, John, Jay right after the break. Also, Senator Ted Cruz is here tonight. He says failure is not an option when it comes to replacing Obamacare. He'll explain what he wants this bill to look like, and also later tonight.
But hey, Sean, let's talk about fake news. We all know who that is, CNN. They are so messy, petty, and trifling. They are the phony, baloney, macaroni news.
All right, our friend, he's on conservative media. He's a comedian. We're going to give him the last word tonight. We'll play you the rest of that this hilarious video coming up later. All that. Dr. Gorka is here as we continue.
Live from America's News headquarters, I'm Kelly Wright. Good evening. Here's what's happening. The president's eldest son may soon find himself on the congressional hot seat. The Senate Intelligence Committee's top Democrat says he, quote, absolutely wants to hear from Donald Trump Jr. about a meeting he had last year with a Russian lawyer. Virginia Senator Mark Warner calls it the first clear evidence of senior-level members of the Trump campaign meeting with Russians. It was reportedly arranged to obtain damaging information about Hillary Clinton. Trump Jr. says he'll be happy to work with the Senate committee. And word out of eastern Mississippi tonight of a deadly military plane crash. The Marine refueling plane went down in a rural area with 9 people on board. At least 5 deaths are confirmed. Dense terrain and powerful explosions from the wreckage are hampering the search for possible survivors. I'm Kelly Wright. Now, back to Hannity.
As we continue tonight on Hannity with reaction to all this breaking news out of Washington, we continue with Sarah Carter, John Solomon, Jay Sekulow. Sarah, I'll go to you. Okay, This is what we do know. We know 125 deep state leaks in 126 days. This is what we know. James Comey violated the Records Act and the Espionage Act. Here we know Hillary Clinton mishandled classified information, top secret information, special access program information, and she also destroyed some of those. Then, of course, the Uranium One deal, pay to play, quid pro quo. Where I grew up, it's called bribery. And she got all this money kicked back to the Clinton Foundation, and Vladimir Putin, Russia conspiracy, got 20%, up to 20% of America's uranium reserves. These are all issues, crimes. General Flynn is another. We know we're committed here. There's nobody talking about any of these issues. And then the Ukrainian influence that I mentioned in the last segment. How is it possible Russia, 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 and all of this other stuff get ignored?
I don't think it's necessarily being ignored anymore, Sean. I mean, we don't know what the FBI is doing now. We know that the mainstream media is not reporting it. But remember, these cases were never actually really closed, were they? I mean, the Clinton Foundation and other issues related to the Clinton Foundation. So we don't know what the FBI is looking at now. What we do know is that there were all these pieces of evidence laid out, and that those pieces of evidence are going to start unraveling. And right, Russia, Russia, Russia when it comes to Trump. But go all the way back. The Obama administration didn't do their due diligence to investigate Russia. We know that the Russians have been meddling since the 1960s. There is no surprise here. And even what happened to Donald Trump Jr., that's no surprise. I mean, I think John brought up a great point.
Is there anything wrong?
Who let Natalia in? We'll get answers.
Would any other presidential campaign, John Heilemann tweeted out today, oh, I've never heard of this before. I'm like, just read Politico in January of 2017 about the Ukrainians working with the Clinton campaign. There's your collusion. Or just read about the dossier guy, and there's more collusion. John Solomon, same question. All the other crimes we know were committed here.
I've covered about 5 or 6 presidential campaigns. In every campaign, someone walks into a Republican and Democratic campaign claiming to have information, and campaigns meet with them. Sometimes they act on it. Sometimes, in this case, it appears they didn't act on it. But the truth of the matter is this is a part of the normal process of the dirty political system that we live in today, and I don't think there's anything particularly remarkable that someone might walk into Trump Tower offering dirt on Hillary Clinton. You would expect that to happen in the middle of an election.
Always happens. And if anyone says it doesn't, it's a lie. And we know what happened with Hillary's campaign, and the DNC actually was working with these people. Jay Secular, let me put up on the side of the screen laws potentially broken by James Comey, and I think some of these laws, very same laws he let Hillary off the hook on, especially the Espionage Act, apply to her.
Right. Yeah, well, this is, you talk about a double standard, and he said, well, she was careless, extremely careless. By the way, it's the standard for gross negligence with the unsecured service situation. But you look at the law and you look at the facts, and this is not hard to put together. So the question now is, what is going to be done with regard to James Comey? And here's what should be happening. First of all, the Department of Justice needs to investigate James Comey. There should be a grand jury impaneled, and he should be investigated. Let's understand what he did. He had a conversation, or several now, we know he leaked at least, 4 memos. He had a series of conversations with the President of the United States. He went to his government computer, put him into a memo form, put him in his government desk to when he needed him after he gets fired, and then releases them. Now he says, of course, during his testimony, this was his own private, he called it recollection recorded. The government saying, no, it's not. It's government property. Those are crimes.
All right. Thank you all for being with us. We will continue all week. We're going to dig deeper. We're going to point out the hypocrisy and tell you how the media has an agenda that's not to help you, the American people. Thanks for being with us. And coming up on this program, we are holding Washington accountable. It is time for Republicans to work and to keep their promises. Senator Ted Cruz will join us next, and also later tonight.
The West will never, ever be broken. Our values will prevail. Our people will thrive, and our civilization will triumph.
While in Warsaw, President Trump showed the world that leading from the front, what it looks like. Dr. Sebastian Gorka, he's here tonight and also tonight.
And I would rather die than listen to CNN for the rest of my life with a 1 star in the Apple Store.
Terrence Williams, the conservative comic that is a social media sensation, gets the last word on Hannity tonight as we continue.